DuMont back in Chicago, and Mark Doyle is here. He's done Director of Advance for Bill Clinton's presidential campaign, and also worked many years with Joe Biden. We were talking about Joe Biden in the last hour, and I want to talk a bit more about Joe Biden because he's not entered. But you said something during the break. You talked about, he's an old white guy. He is an old.
I said I'm an old white guy.
You're an old white guy, but he's an old white guy. He's older than you. So my question is, what is it that he brings to the table? If Hillary Clinton was going to be the third term of Barack Obama, which a lot of people said that was her reason for running, isn't he just a third term for Barack Obama, and the American voters have already voted on that?
Well, again, let's look back at the final vote count. Hillary Clinton did get about 3.5 million more votes than Donald Trump. So if your point is...
Yeah, but she lost the election.
She did, but your point is, aren't they sick of Obama? I would argue they are not. I would also say that if you take the 2.8, whatever the final number was, and then about the 8 million more votes that were cast for Democrats in the 16 midterms, you start with 11 million more Democratic votes. And what people like about Joe Biden are several things. One is that he's a regular guy from a regular background who I took the train with for 2 years straight, who's had incredible tragedies in his life that he has overcome. And through it all, he has been the same guy when he started in 1972 as he is today. He is steeped in foreign policy. He is steeped in domestic policy. The very first climate change bill ever enacted in the Senate was his in 1986. Now, it didn't go anywhere, but he's been progressive before progressive was sort of the cool thing to do.
But when he is asked why he's running for president of the United States, which is a very simple question.
Yeah.
It's one that Ted Kennedy totally screwed up in 1980, and it ended his campaign. Would Joe Biden be able to give an articulate, honest answer to that question
Yes.
without it being, it's my turn, I've waited, I've had a lifetime of tragedy, and it is my turn, I'm the next guy, I deserve
I want your
this.
sympathetic vote.
Would that...
Never in 100 years have you ever heard Joe Biden say at any election, at any time, I think it's time for me to run because I lost my wife and daughter 35 years ago. Never, ever, ever.
He would never articulate it, but I'm talking about what's inside the man.
What's inside
why,
of him?
I mean, why is he running now when he didn't run 4 years ago against Hillary?
Because
is it
his
just
son
because it's
was
easier?
dying of
Okay.
cancer.
That makes
That's
complete
why.
sense.
That's why.
Do you view, Jillian, do you view Joe Biden as, first of all, as the front runner, and do you view him as probably the toughest guy for Donald Trump to beat?
Well, for the first part of that question, as the front runner, I do think he is. You know, he's the former vice president of the United States. He has a ton of name ID. He has a network. He's been in political office for 50 years, right? You know, I mean, he has a huge infrastructure of support within the Democratic Party. And so I think when he gets in, he is certainly the front runner. And what happens after that, we'll see what happens. I don't know if he's the best person to beat Donald Trump. That's why we get to have a really competitive Democratic primary where we have an embarrassment of riches. You know, I think that among Democratic primary voters, there's a conversation going on. Do we want someone who is electable and can appeal to moderate voters, or do we believe that making someone electable means that they bring new people out and engage new people?
What's your answer to that question?
I actually think it's finding the person where we're not choosing between the two, where they do both, where they are appealing to a new generation of voters, people who often stay home, and they don't turn off moderate voters who are tired of Donald Trump's
So
policies.
is that person in yet?
I think so, and I think there's actually 4 or 5 people that fit that bill, and it's really a matter of seeing
They
what...
are.
I think it's a lot of the people that are at the top of the ticket. I think Joe Biden is potentially one of them. I think Kamala Harris. I think Beto O'Rourke, Pete Buttigieg, and several others, I think all fit in that mold. And I think
Would
the
Congressman Tim Ryan fit in that list, even though most people don't know who he is yet?
I
The
don't,
Congressman from Youngstown.
you know, I don't know. I think it's really, he got in late. I mean, some of the people that are lesser known got in really early, and so they were able to build relationships with people. They have a jump start of almost 3 months, 4 months now, and they've been able to raise money, build relationships with donors, build relationships with party leaders, and I think it's going to be really hard to catch up if you're a lesser known member of Congress at this point.
Tim Ryan, the congressman, he was on George Stephanopoulos today.
Yeah.
And he was asked about what would make him unique running for president, because he's not relatively well known. And he sort of answers the question that I've asked on this program for the last several months, and that is, if show me a candidate that can win Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and I'll show you who the next president of the United States is. There's only one person that has that, in his track record, and that's Donald Trump. I think amongst the field, I think the answer to that question would be Tim Ryan. But again, he's got to come from where he is today. He's got a lot of work to do. I think Joe Biden possibly could as well.
Look at Amy Klobuchar, who
Amy Klobuchar's
she
next up.
announced and immediately went to Wisconsin. Look at Beto O'Rourke, who almost won in Texas.
Yeah, I'm not
Deep
so sure
red
that
Texas.
I'm not so sure that Beto O'Rourke does it. But let's listen to what Tim Ryan said today about the uniqueness that he brings to the Democratic primary. Let's take a look.
My campaign and my behavior as president is going to be to rebuild the middle class in the United States. People are tired of just getting by. They're tired of just surviving. They want to thrive. They want their kids to thrive. And we've got to stop talking about the minimums. We got to figure out how we create an economy in healthcare, in energy, within manufacturing, where people can make 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour. That's the American dream.
Agreed.
Okay.
Jeannie.
He sounds like Donald Trump. And he's attempting to actually create a constituency among Donald Trump voters. That's exactly what he's saying. But everything that he talked about there is exactly what's not happening in Washington. He wants to bring back manufacturing. He wants to create jobs in energy. Who tried to shut down the XL pipeline? The Democrats. I mean, who had the war on coal?
And he ran against
the Democrats.
Nancy Pelosi.
Right. Who wants the new Green Deal, which would destroy the economics in this country? Destroy them. It's fantasy land to think that the new Green Deal is the way to go. You would literally go back to Little House in the Big Woods.
Mark,
Laura Ingalls
question to you.
time.
Well,
Based on what you heard, does Tim Ryan have at least the message that could win the Democratic primary? No, I'm going to back that. Does he have the message that could win Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania?
short answer, yes, and I'll tell you why. It's Joe Biden's message from 08, from 04, from when he first ran. In 08, with Biden on the ticket, we spent most of our time from the convention through in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Michigan, and Florida. With Biden on the ticket, Democrat hadn't won Scranton, Pennsylvania since President Johnson. In 08, they won Scranton, Pennsylvania. In my view, and which is why you look today at maybe it's name recognition in every single poll, Biden's up by double digits. It's because he can do exactly what Tim Ryan just said and what Joe Biden's been talking about for 25 years.
Okay. But when he has been the top candidate running in a primary, he's had 2 unsuccessful campaigns for the presidency. So he's been speaking that way as a vice president and as a presidential candidate. I'm Bruce DuMont. We'll be talking about Iowa next. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thanks very much for joining us. And joining us now via Skype is Robin Johnson. Robin Johnson is a professor of political science at Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois. And Robin, nice to have you with us on Beyond the Beltway tonight.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on, Bruce.
I would like to get your response to a poll that came out. It was produced by your college, and this is of Iowa caucus voters, and this is what they had to say based on the recent poll. Let's look at the graphic. It has Joe Biden in first place at 27%, Bernie Sanders 16%. I think Pete Buttigieg, a surprise, at 9% in third place, Elizabeth Warren 7%, Kamala Harris 7%, and Beto O'Rourke at 6%. So now you have been taking this poll for a long, long time. Now, based on people that you've interviewed thus far, and based on the pulse of Iowa that you take, what are the issues that are moving people towards one candidate or the other?
Well, I have to say up front, that's a Monmouth University poll. It's not Monmouth College.
Okay, I'm
just
sorry.
For correction.
All right,
But those numbers
where are they, by
fairly-
the way? Because they're getting publicity, but where are they located and where are you located?
We're right about 30 minutes from the Iowa border, near Burlington. Monmouth University's in New Jersey.
Okay, very
Just
good.
for clarity.
Well, I stand corrected.
Those numbers are fairly close to what the Des Moines Register poll has shown of Iowa voters, where it's Biden and Sanders running 1 and 2 very close, and then next in the Des Moines Register poll was Elizabeth Warren. But I think it's very fluid. I think Iowans are doing a good job in their role as kind of the first in the nation contest. If you get a chance and see some of these town hall meetings, you can see they take their role very seriously, ask good questions. And what we're seeing in the events I've been to so far are healthcare seems to be the number one issue still. A lot of concerns about healthcare. There are concerns about climate, especially water. Pollution, which is a big issue over in the Des Moines area and in some rural areas as well. An issue that's rising in importance, I think, is this issue of corporate consolidation, especially in the ag industry. It seems to be getting more and more notice as an emerging issue. And I think continuing economic concerns, in spite of the numbers, which look good, and the growth in the economy, I think people still have concerns over economic security, and a lot of that revolves, I think, around healthcare and stagnant incomes.
Do you think that the recent publicity surrounding Joe Biden and the touchy-feely nature of his personality, has that had any impact at all in caucus voters?
I don't sense it yet, Bruce. I mean, I think it's going to play out. I think once he gets here, on the ground in Iowa, gets his campaign off the ground, if he does indeed run, which I think he will, I think you'll see how he addresses that here on the ground, and then people will really form firm opinions about that issue. So he does have a well of support, I think, goodwill, as Barack Obama's vice president. As you mentioned a little earlier, his 2 tries at the presidency in the Democratic primaries have been bad failures, I think it's fair to say. So we'll see. In some ways, he does have a reservoir of support. The question is going to be, how deep is that support? The Des Moines Register poll asked, he also leads among voters who would be their first or second choice, and he's got a little bigger lead there. So he seems to be a lot of people's second choice as well, which will be interesting to see how it plays out as this field takes shape and after he finally gets into the race.
At caucus time, who turns out? Are they primarily young people or are they primarily older people?
It's mostly older people, but Barack Obama in 2008 was very successful at getting young people out. There's concerted efforts to get young people out to participate. The Iowa Democratic Party just undertook some reforms to allow virtual precinct caucuses where people can compete virtually instead of having to be there, which is an attempt to kind of open it up more to people that perhaps are disabled or otherwise can't make a cold January night, February night in Iowa. So I think you're going to see, though, because of the interest in defeating Donald Trump, I think you're going to see a really big turnout in the caucuses next year.
Now, Jillian Rosenberg Armour is here, and she's a Hawkeye graduate, and she spent a lot of time in Iowa, and she's got a lot to say about the caucuses. And you've got there's going to be some changes this time.
Yeah, as Robin was just mentioning, there's going to be the first ever a series of virtual caucuses in which people are going to be able to participate. I'm not really sure how the technology is going to work on that yet, but I think one of the other really interesting things is another change is in how the results are reported. So one of the criticisms from the Bernie Sanders campaign last time was that you didn't have they felt that there wasn't enough transparency in the reporting of the results. And so now you're going to have a raw total number of people that show when they first go to the caucus who they were supporting, without getting into a ton of weeds on some kind of arcane caucus laws. I think that could potentially change how really people view the Iowa caucuses, because we're going to hear that night not just the people who get delegates, but also potentially people who maybe got 3% or 2% of initial caucus supporters. And interested to hear from Robin, what he thinks about that. One other small thing is that the big number for people for the Iowa caucuses is getting to 15% of the people that show up in the room. You cannot be awarded delegates unless you have 15% of the initial count. And I think, especially with so many people just polling in the 9, 8, 7, 6% range, how that will impact the race.
Could you comment then? The Democrats obviously changed their super delegate process. So what is the impact in the caucuses and how they're awarding delegates to that whole process in the end?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the document is like 50 pages. The caucus to convention document from the Iowa Democratic Party is pretty long, and how they actually award the virtual caucuses and then the caucuses on the night.
Is that 15% threshold new then?
No, that's always existed, and that's different than the Republican caucuses, I believe.
Yep. Robin, let me ask you this question. It's asked every 4 years. Why Iowa? How does Iowa continually be in the position they're in? And obviously there's always a battle between you and New Hampshire, but other states also ask the question. Iowa is not a very demographically balanced state. How come you're first?
Well, I think partly it's been the tradition since 1972. Jimmy Carter was the first candidate to really make Iowa prominent in '76. And I think since then, I think the consensus has been, while Iowa isn't representative demographically, it is a place where candidates have to come out and meet voters, retail politics one-on-one. I mean, already candidates are streaming through our area, southeast Iowa, where my show originates from, in Burlington, and it offers a chance to see candidates up front, how they handle questions, and really practice retail politics instead of having to raise millions of dollars and get on TV like they would have to do if it was in a state like California or Illinois. So I think it's a good thing. And I think it's a good thing that we start in places where voters get a chance to see candidates up front instead of just on the television. So I think that's why it stays number one, and I think it will be in the future. And followed up with New Hampshire, again, it gives a chance for smaller states to have some say in this process and not just have it all decided by television ads.
Mike Miller has a question from DePaul University.
Hey there, Robin. Just curious, two of the top people in Iowa appear to be Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, correct?
Joe Biden.
I know that, but in the top four.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to ask, are there really that many people who essentially support socialists? Bernie is an avowed socialist, and Warren is kind of a soft socialist. And it seems to me, why in Iowa could there be that many people who embrace a system that has been a failure everywhere it's been tried? I just don't get it.
The Des Moines Register poll showed 56% of Democrats are okay with a candidate wanting the U.S. to be more socialist. I think part of that, though, is part of that, though, is I think what people, my sense is anyway, when you talk to people about socialism, it doesn't describe a full socialist system in the traditional sense of the word. I think what people refer to as more social democracy is what they mean. Programs like Medicare, Social Security, Medicare for All, which they would envision as being a more social democratic response, policy response. So I know that there's a lot of hardcore socialists out there in the traditional sense, but I think for most people it's more of a social democratic leaning where government does not control all aspects of the economy.
Jeannie Ives.
Well, I'm very curious about this. How come at the top of the polling for the Democrat Party, it's all white men?
I think it's based on name recognition mostly right now. Joe Biden's well known from his years as vice president to President Obama. He's run twice before. He had some contacts in Iowa when he ran both times. Bernie Sanders, of course, ran last time and ran a very competitive race, basically tied with Hillary Clinton in Iowa. My guess is, Sanders' support is more ideological, and I think it's firmer. Biden's is based more on name ID, and as I said before, I think we'll see how that plays out.
Does Amy Klobuchar get? She obviously not in this poll, but does she get anything for being a next door neighbor? Does that mean anything historically in the state?
It did with Obama. I'm not sure it's manifested itself yet with Klobuchar. She's been in the state a couple of times. She's gotten some decent coverage, but she hasn't taken off yet in terms that would get her up into the top tier. But that's a possibility.
Robin Johnson, thank you very much for being with us. He is with Monmouth College. That's in Monmouth, Illinois. And he also does Heartland Politics on KBUR in Burlington, Iowa. One of our longtime affiliates. We'll be there to cover it at least a couple of times. And Robin's always with us when we originate from Iowa. And Robin, nice to have you with us this evening to give your pulse on Iowa. Back shortly. Bruce DuMont back. Nice to have you with us. Our Democrats this evening are Jillian Rosenberg Armour, and she is the head of her company called
Wildfire Contact.
Wildfire Contact.
Not to be mistaken with the steak restaurant here in
That's
Chicago.
right. That's a Wildfire.
Yeah.
But again, congratulations on getting the campaign and election awards, and also you've run a lot of other awards in the industry of campaign management. And also Mark Doyle joins us, and he is with an organization called
Rags of Honor,
and
Veteran
also
Roasters.
A very good idea. A very good idea.
Thank
Helping
you.
those
Homeless veterans,
homeless
and
veterans.
at-risk veterans.
How many homeless veterans are there?
So there are, on any given night, last year there were 300,000 homeless for at least one night. There are chronically about 160,000 homeless. There are 20,000 homeless just in LA County. And there are still 1,000 homeless in Chicago. Mayor Rahm Emanuel did a yeoman's job. When he took over, there were 2,000. And they put some money in the city budget when they didn't have it to take over some old apartment buildings, got them, and put homeless veterans in them.
If you were a homeless veteran, or if you are homeless and you're living in the city of Chicago, where we do this program, isn't there a place where you can spend the night? Can't you go
There are
to a
several.
mission? So
There
no
are.
one really has to be out.
But yes, but Tamika Holyfield worked for me. She was a Navy. She deployed to Afghanistan. She came back, lost her job. She had 2 young children. She went through her savings. She ended up losing her apartment. She let her kids stay with her sisters during the week. She went to a shelter one night. She almost got raped. Back in the car. Safer to live in the car. So, yes, there are places to go. They're not always that safe, and it is degrading and demeaning. But there are a lot of good organizations, more and more. A Safe Haven, Thresholds. The VA here locally has done a really good job. And for the record, the VA gets a bad rap on a lot of things. They see 23 million patients a year. 18 years, 2 wars. They are busting at the seam. So they're doing their best to keep up with it. But it's
Our Republicans this evening, Mike Miller, DePaul University for about 38 years.
Yep.
And Jeannie Ives, former state lawmaker and former Republican candidate for governor, and a leader is the conservative Republican movement here in the state of Illinois. I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, we said that we were going to give you an update on what's happening in New Hampshire. So let's take a look at the recent polls. This is St. Alsom's College, which also hosts one of the debates. It has also Joe Biden in first place. It has Bernie Sanders in first place with 23%, Biden in second place with 16%, Mayor Pete Buttigieg also in third place there with 11%, and then you have Elizabeth Warren from the next door state, 9%, Kamala Harris, 7%, and Beto O'Rourke, 6%. So it's the same order as in the state of Iowa. So one of the other issues that will be, I want to get back to talking about some issues, and let's ask our Republicans. The president is dead set against never releasing his taxes. He's waiting for this audit to end, which one doesn't believe is probably ever going to end.
I
are the de-
personally don't think there's any reason to release your taxes. It is one of the most personal documents. It is like your healthcare document. It should not be available for public inspection, in my opinion, honestly. You fill out usually some sort of economic statement of interest. It's got to be very detailed. It can be cross-referenced with other documents. We've found people that have lied on those before. It's easy to find discrepancies in that document. Now, I mean, I've done taxes for 8 years. I'm telling you, at the tax desk, you learn a lot about what's happening in people's lives. A lot. And the tax document is a very personal document. I personally don't think, look, I don't care if it would be a Democrat or a
You don't
Republican.
want anybody to release it.
I do not care.
100%.
Let's hear from the Democrats. What about it, Mark?
I
Do
don't
you
even-
want the president's
Yes.
tax returns?
Yes.
Why?
Why?
Yes. Because the American people need to know. By the way, he did that summary that you talked about that several others have done, and his was 2 pages. It was like, I went to the drugstore to look for a job, and this is how much money I made.
That is
right?
not what Sarah Sanders said today. She said it was many, many pages, hundreds of pages of information that
Was it?
he
It
gave.
wasn't. It was 2
Whatever.
pages.
You
But
say
anyway,
you were
needs
about to say
release
the
them.
American people.
Need to know
Why?
why he claims to be a billionaire, and it is standard, normal procedure for every other president has done it. If you have nothing to hide, if you've done all straight deals, put them out there.
Every president
Put 'em out
since
there.
John Kennedy has released their transcripts from college, high school, everything, except Barack Obama. He
That's
broke.
not true.
That's not true. He
That's
did.
just not
He did
true.
not.
We're gonna stick with taxes.
But
You have
yeah,
nothing to
but it's
hide,
in-
release
Jillian.
the tax
They don't
returns,
need
put
to
them out there,
release
and
any of
kill the
those
story.
things.
Jillian.
Yeah, I mean, it's standard
No reason.
operating procedure to release your taxes, and whether or not, to follow your train of logic, it's something that's personal and average citizens shouldn't do. That's fine. We're talking about the President of the United States of America, and we have a right to really know how he's made his money.
No, we
Has
don't.
it been?
No, we don't.
We
We
has
have
it
no
been
right to
on the
know.
back
No, you don't.
Of,
goodness.
like people who have been here illegally working in his country.
That's
club.
not on a
That
tax
is
return.
not on a
Has it
tax
been-
return.
That's not on a
Understand.
tax
That
return.
is like, I mean,
What?
And how do
people
you-
maybe who've worked
but-
for
but-
him,
but-
where his
No, that's
his
not on the tax
relationship
return
with
either.
foreign
None of that.
corporations.
None of that is on
We
the
have a
tax
right to know
return.
that information.
None of
No,
that
but
is
why-
on the tax return.
I want to know. I want to know why. I'm asking the Democrats. Why do we have? By the way, you also said if you release the tax returns, story's over.
Yeah, if you have
he
nothing to
releases,
hide.
it's not going to be over.
No.
No, it's not.
gonna-
Why?
gonna-
It's not. On top of it,
Because the news media and the Democrats will not let it be over. There will be something on page 315
Yeah.
they're going to want to know more about.
And
do they have a right to know about that?
on top of
Absolutely.
it, the majority of those folks sitting in office right now, first of all, none of them do their own taxes. I mean, I just did ours. I do my own taxes because I studied it. I did it for 8 years for other people. I do our own taxes. And the majority of people don't do their own taxes, and they don't even understand every single line item, every other schedule that connects to another line item and to an
What does
attachment that
have
goes to
do
another
with
line.
releasing your taxes or not?
Because it's a very complicated thing to begin with, and if people aren't going to understand what you release, then what's the use of it anyway? And I frankly don't
I think
care.
people understand when you see things that show impropriety.
No, they
conflicts
don't,
the
of
because they
IRS
don't
should have caught
understand
that.
what's impropriety or not. They would not even understand
You
the
couldn't
transactions.
possibly believe
The
it.
IRS should have caught that.
62 million people did not think it was important 3.5 years ago. 63 million people, 62 million people said, I don't care.
And it's an income statement. It has nothing to do with how wealthy he is. Wealth has to do with the market value of your assets.
shortly.
There's
nothing to do
nothing
with
on there for that.
Yeah, well,
Exactly
what-
right.
And why not put it out?
No, the
Put it
point
out.
is,
Nobody else
Because
does.
it's
so
personal.
let me
So
ask
what?
you this, 'cause do you be-
President of the
then-
United States,
then
put
you
it out.
believe, let me ask the Democrats, then you believe that the Democrats who are demanding the IRS release this information in the next 10 days, you believe from a political standpoint they are on the right track and there's political mileage to be gained?
Here, I would say, in the long run, if this is all we have to talk about, this is not a winning issue for the next election. Because in the end, 62 million people didn't care about it. And so,
So why are the Democrats talking about it?
because it's the right thing to do, is to release your tax
They
and let
no
everybody
longer
see
have
what's in
the
it.
Mueller collusion to go on.
Well,
So
we
now
don't
we're
know
doing
that
this.
because they haven't released a full report yet.
But the full report will be coming out.
Full
Yeah,
report
and
be
it said
coming
no
out.
pollution.
Look, I worked in that place, and these people.
Which place?
The White House.
And?
And these people are not fit to be in that building. These people, Jared Kushner and his wife and Don Jr. and the rest of them that hang out there and use this as their own personal purse are not fit to serve at the highest office in the land. They are not. They are not.
I didn't vote for him, but
what-
we decided, yeah, he was fit.
What specific evidence
Why?
do you have?
Okay,
Why?
well, let's imagine that somebody who worked for Barack Obama during the transition from Bush to him decided to go and set up a secret communications in the Russian embassy. Just think about that. Don't think about anything else. Just think about that one thing, that Jared Kushner was trying to set up a secret back channel, not in our embassy, in the Russian embassy. If Barack Obama had done that, they would have strung
Wait,
him
like
up.
he said, I'll have more flexibility after the election?
Wait a minute.
He's the president of the United
Did
States.
Mueller, did you
I
call
mean,
Mueller?
did
you let him know that
I
there's-
just,
I thought
It's
Mueller. I thought
preposterous.
Mueller already took care of this. There was no interaction between the Russians and Mr. Trump, and nor any member of his family.
That's not true.
What do you mean it's not true?
That's what he
Mueller
said.
said that's not
Mueller
true.
said that's true.
That was in the summary.
seen
by
That
the
was
way.
in the
report?
summary. Have
That's
you
the
seen the
summary.
report?
Summary. I've seen as much
That's
as
the
you
summary.
have.
That's the summary that
The
Attorney
Senate had
General
a
Barr.
committee that went through it and found nothing. The House had a committee went through it.
That is a
prote-
huge
every-
accusation
It's a
that you
huge-
made.
Large,
Yeah.
That's an
really.
incredible accusation that you made against Trump and the folks that he decided to surround himself, people that he trusts.
Yeah.
Now, you've been around in politics, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? It's really hard to find people that you can trust that know who you have your back. That's why you get to hire who you want to and put them in positions of trust so that you're surrounded yourself with people that
Roger,
know. And
got it.
that's what he is doing.
And look
And
how many
let him
people
do
have
that.
been indicted
So
that have been part of
here's
his
the one thing I
campaign.
will say.
Those people
Who?
were indicted for nothing
people
related
who-
to the campaign. There were
Nothing
things they did
related.
before.
There's been nobody
They were
related.
process crimes.
They were
They had to do with
Manafort.
lying.
Manafort. They was not indicted about anything related
But
to the
these, you just said
campaign.
these are the people that he trusts and these are the people he chooses to surround him. And I mean,
the campaign
that's a
chairman's going to
conflict
jail.
of interest.
So is Jared Kushner indicted and I didn't know it?
no, I didn't say that. I'm
Ivanka
talking
indicted
about
and I
all the
don't know
others
Melania?
that actually have.
Who?
But they were invited. They were process crimes.
I mean,
Manafort
those-
was let go of the campaign
Had to
too,
do
by
with
the way.
Ukraine in 25 years ago.
Nothing to
nothing
do
to do
with
with
this.
now.
Nothing to do with now.
I can only say this.
Here's the
When we
scary
come
thing.
back, we're going to pause 1-800-723-8029. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Attorney General and his belief that spying took place in the closing days of the Obama administration. Back shortly. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Every week there is a congressional hearing of some sort, and this past week there was certainly one, and the Attorney General of the United States was called before the Congress to answer some questions, and this was before the Senate. And here is his response to one such inquiry, and boy, did it set Washington on fire.
I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. Yes, I think spying did occur. I am not saying that improper surveillance occurred. I'm saying that I am concerned about it and looking into it.
Okay. Should we be concerned if spying or illegal eavesdropping took place? Does everybody agree
Absolutely,
with that?
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
of
Okay.
course.
Okay,
100%.
When
understand. One-
illegal spying happened, which he said
one-
definitely
one-
The
did.
use
question
of
next
the FBI and the Justice Department by one administration to spy upon the other candidate from the other party
Which there
based
are no
upon.
facts saying that happened.
Well, I'm not so sure that's the case.
And you
Well, we're
have-
going to find
you
out.
just
That's
said
what we're
that
going.
happened.
That's what
That's
we're going to
making
find
this
out.
Investigation.
accusation.
but
so
that-
you
but
have
things
But
like
again,
the-
but let me-
But things like the
just- okay,
FISA court was
just
used
one at
against
a time. Go
a
ahead, one at a
citizen
time.
by like Carter Page, based upon a FISA thing that was based upon this this Steele dossier, which was all lies. And the FBI lied to
Or
the
by
judge
Democrat Party.
to get this FISA court. I mean, they're just, I fear the FBI. I fear things like NSA. That's partly why I'm a Republican. I'm a small government Republican. I fear the government. I want that that's why I have to protect the Constitution. It protects me from the government.
That's right.
And I'm so fearful that anybody, a Republican or a Democrat, would ever use the power of the FBI or the Justice Department to try to spy upon people or to destroy people. And I'm afraid they're going to get away with it.
I want to ask our Democrats. Do you want to know the answer to the question
Absolutely.
whether we're spying?
100%.
Do you want to know the answer?
100%.
Yes, of course. I
Okay.
think that there is zero evidence that shows that
Oh,
this
but
happened
again,
in any
you
way.
are, in all
100%.
deference, you are a well-respected political consultant who consults Democrats.
Correct, but I also live in a world of facts.
You were, and you are suggesting that the Attorney General of the United States does not live in a world of facts, and yet he has been a respected, for the most part, has been a respected lawyer for decades in Washington, D.C., praised by Democrats when his name was moved forward, and yet he said last week that he thinks there might have been spying, might have been, not that there definitely was, although he said he thought there was. So would you want him to share his facts with you? Would you want to know that? I mean,
Yes.
if the
is
Obama
anything
administration
that
was
suggests that
spying,
this could have
do you
happened-
both want to know that?
100%.
Do you want to know that?
Yes.
Okay, so what's wrong with everybody getting upset when the Attorney General says, I want to look into this? Doesn't everybody want him to look into it?
Yes.
They should.
Yes.
I
They
guess
should.
Here's what I think. I think it was the way it was delivered. I think if he had said nope, because the next day he came in, he recalibrated and said, I just want to say, I'm not saying there was spying. I'm saying there might have been surveillance. And so the point
That
is,
is a distinction without a difference.
then he should have
There's
said it on
no
the front end, and what he should
difference
say
from
is, what I'm about to do, and we can do this in closed-door session, or we can do this here, I'm going to bring evidence to validate this case, and I want to bring it to the American people because I want to shine a light on it, and he ought to do that.
That is exactly what they call spying. That's
then
exactly
he
what
should
they
show it.
call
I
intelligence.
got it. Then he should show
Intelligence
it.
surveillance is also known, AKA, otherwise known as, spying.
But to understand one thing, that let's just understand this, and this is from all the intelligence services. If they picked up any chatter, it's because they were routinely listening to Russians. And during the routine surveilling of Russian assets, now whether or not they
Yeah.
colluded or broke the law
They didn't.
is here.
No, we can
Okay,
say that now.
Got it?
They
You're
didn't.
right. You're right.
I can say that.
Thank you.
Whether or not they colluded or broke the law, if you break into somebody's house but you don't steal anything, you still broke in.
Yes.
The reason it started is because they heard these conversations while they were surveilling the Russians, not the Trump campaign.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, we don't know that.
Again,
They,
allegedly.
the
But
whole
again,
thing
another-
started,
go
though,
ahead.
from a false dossier
That's right.
paid for by the Clinton campaign.
That's right.
That's how the whole thing started.
But you know, it was split,
And then,
right? The first half was paid for by Republicans,
understand.
and then it was
That's
handed over,
irrelevant.
right? It was,
Yes,
It-
it's
know that's right.
Where was it
Yeah.
used?
Yeah.
That's,
so,
But
And,
the question is, these are allegations. I mean, there are a lot of people who are within the 62 million people that I referenced, of whatever Donald Trump. There are a lot of people who believe that the FBI and law enforcement conspired against Donald Trump.
I believe it.
So dangerous.
I believe it.
It
Struck.
What's dangerous?
Page.
Is it dangerous
they
to
did.
believe it?
They did. Those
They did.
text messages between.
They did it.
They did.
don't know.
They
I'm
absolutely did
saying
that.
if-
Peter Strzok and his
I'm
girlfriend.
very concerned.
As we were just saying and just talking about, if this is true, that's concerning. But to infer it without having, a solid case and a ton of facts to back you up on that is very dangerous
There's
to
a-
make that
He's
accusation.
the Attorney General of the United States. He was asked a question by a member of the United States Senate. He responded. Now that is, by the way, you talk about, casting
He's under oath.
aspersions, and he's under oath.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to measure that against Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff has spent 2.5 years
In plain sight.
in plain sight, with inflammatory rhetoric, suggesting all kinds of things, the most of which has been debunked by the Mueller report as interpreted by Attorney General Barr. We will know next week, hopefully. The Mueller report will be out there. But again, if there's anybody that's been out there spreading rumors and innuendo, frankly, it's been Adam Schiff as the chairman of the House committee. On that note, we are out of time. I want to thank Mark Doyle for being with us.
Great to be here.
And Jillian Rosenberg Armour, thank you very much. Maiden voyages from our two Democrats this evening. And our Republicans tonight, Mike Miller from DePaul University. I did that the first time you run the show. And Jeannie Ives, the ever-popular Jeannie Ives.
having us.
Our thanks to Fritz Goldman and Aaron Johnson, our new board operator this evening. They help make this program possible. Until next Sunday night, I'm Bruce DuMont. Good night from Chicago.